Hey everybody, and what? Hey, what's up everybody? Chris here, bringing you that Pearson opinion. Today I want to give you my opinion on what I think are the top 5 Resident Evil games. Resident Evil is one of the biggest gaming horror franchises, like, ever. It's certainly the most recognizable. For me, Resident Evil is up there with Final Fantasy as my 2 favorite franchises ever made. And they're definitely a staple of my childhood. As a kid, the first Resident Evil I ever played was Resident Evil 2. And honestly, it was terrifying. The first time you ever come across that liquor, man, that was so scary. Now this franchise has tried so hard to keep up with current trends that I feel like it's just lost its way, and it really has forgotten what made Resident Evil so amazing and terrifying in the first place. There was a couple of things that made Resident Evil so scary. Firstly, there was the controls. The slower tank movements really limited the way you were able to move in small areas. This really created a feeling of being truly trapped when you're in a room that's full of zombies. The pre-rendered backgrounds in this game allowed developers to create a realistic, spooky, dark setting with limited camera views. These limited camera views made it so that you can see yourself, but you may not be able to see what's around the corner or what's in the next room. And trust me, there is nothing scarier than entering a room and hearing a hunter or a licker that you can't see. It's bad. The fact that your health and ammo was so limited in this game, combined with the fact that there was no continues, if you died you had to go back to a save point. That really gave you a sense of vulnerability in this game. Something that you really don't feel in the newer games. That vulnerability really forced you to pick and choose which enemies you were actually going to engage with and which ones you were going to try and run for your life. Lastly, the music was just so atmospheric in these games. The use of violin and piano just gave a real, unbearable sense of dread that never ever left throughout the entire game, and you found yourself so happy to be in a save room and to hear that nice music. So without further ado, here are my favourite 5 Resident Evil games. I will say, these are my opinion. They're in no way fact. Okay, first up, number 5, Resident Evil 3. Released in 1999 with the title Resident Evil 3, this game actually comes before Resident Evil 2. This spot was actually pretty tough to decide because it was either this or Code Veronica. I chose this in the end because the introduction of the big bad nemesis was just way too iconic to miss. So Resident Evil 3 was a little bit more action orientated than its predecessors, but it did keep a lot of the conventions that make the franchise so amazing. One of those additions was the introduction of Nemesis. A giant, ugly, terrifying tyrant with not only super strength, but a giant rocket launcher. What? One of the cooler parts of these terrifying encounters with Nemesis is that when he does burst through a wall in front of you, or jump you in a dark hallway, you at least are prompted with an option to either run away from him or to fight him. I'd probably suggest run. Okay, next up, number 4. Resident Evil Revelations. I included this one to prove that, yeah, okay, they may have lost their way with the franchise as a whole, but they're still capable of producing really terrifying games. With Jill Valentine investigating a threat on board an abandoned cruise ship in the Mediterranean, this 2012 release brings back a lot of the suspense that's been lost in more recent games by having you navigate around small rooms and really tight corridors. And it's these tight corridors and small rooms that really serve as a constant reminder that you're trapped on this ship. It makes you feel really claustrophobic at times, and that is terrifying. Oh, and the addition of these ooze creatures in these small rooms makes you just not want to be in them rooms at all. This combination of the new style of play with the old style of fear really earns this title the number 4 slot. And the fight with Rachel Foley is possibly one of the scariest fights in any Resident Evil game ever. Her constant screaming and crying during the battle really chills you to your core. It's a real combination of feeling sorry for her for what happened, but literally being terrified of her. Scary stuff. Okay, we're down to number 3. The Resident Evil 1 remake. Oh man, This game. Released in 2002 for the Nintendo GameCube, this was the first Resident Evil remake, and it really blew everyone away. The improved graphics were such a step up from the previous games that I literally found myself just standing in corridors appreciating the graphics. Of course, this remake was spearheaded by the original Resident Evil creator, Shinji Mikami. It had those same classic conventions of a Resident Evil horror game, the same gameplay with all that added terror. This truly was music to every Resident Evil fan's ears. And you know, I don't think it's a coincidence that Shinji Mikami worked on all of the most suspenseful and the best Resident Evil games. Just saying. One of my scariest memories from this game, that feeling of ease when you're running past the corpse of a zombie that you killed ages ago, only to soil your pants as they get up and start charging towards you at some pretty fast pace. Okay, number 2 is Resident Evil 2. Okay, so this one was really hard for me. Because it was the first ever Resident Evil I played, it's always going to hold a special place in my heart. But it is deserving of the number 2 spot, and here's why. Released in 1998, Resident Evil 2 takes place in Raccoon City and stars Claire Redfield, whose brother is Chris Redfield, who was the main protagonist in Resident Evil 1. And of course, everybody's favourite Raccoon City Police Department rookie, Leon Kennedy. This game was awesome. Unlike the first installment, this game shows the effects of the virus on an entire city as opposed to just the mansion, but only where it matters. You see, one of my favourite things about Resident Evil is that you're trapped in these really creepy, monster-filled places. But the great thing about Resident Evil 2 is it just gives you a little bit of a peek into what's actually happening outside, just for a little moment, just to give you that feeling that you're probably going to be safer off inside than out. This game introduced the iconic Licker to the franchise, a truly terrifying enemy with a giant tongue whose noises will really make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Another great thing about this game, the scenarios. Not only did you have scenarios for both Claire and Leon, which in them scenarios, choices that you make in the game affects the other one, but they also have an A and a B scenario for each different character. So totaling 4 different versions of the game alone. Not counting the unlockable Hunk and Tofu versions of the game. Oh, and if you thought Nemesis was scary, the huge trench coat wearing tyrant in this game, appearing from nowhere at times and relentlessly following you, is enough to make you not even want to open the next door. So here we are, number 1, Resident Evil 4. This 2005 exclusive for the GameCube brought a new style of play to Resident Evil that would change the franchise forever, and not for the better. So you're probably wondering, why have you even put this at number 1? Well, although I feel that the changes made in this game have made the franchise worse overall, I think that the implementation of them in this one game is so perfect that this deserves the number 1 spot. Capcom really changed everything in this game, from the movement to the 3D backgrounds to the enemies, literally everything, except for one thing. They still kept that element of fear. The new style of controls gave the player a behind the character third-person perspective, allowing them to see exactly what is in front of them and allowing them to aim the weapon at any part of an enemy's body. This meant that you could stop enemies in their tracks right away by shooting them in the legs, or you could just shoot them straight in the head, something which you weren't able to do before. This did make the game much more action orientated, but they did keep somewhat the tank controls, so you can't actually see exactly what's creeping up behind you. The enemies are no longer mindless zombies walking towards you, infected villagers are now the new enemy. They're smarter and more deadly, with the ability to strategize against you and to operate weapons. Not much scarier than a giant guy with a bag on his head chasing you with a chainsaw. Changes to the environment took away those pre-rendered backgrounds and allowed the character free roam around the entire environment. While in my opinion this takes away some of the realism of the really detailed pre-rendered backgrounds, this does allow for enemies to be literally anywhere, making you feel like there is nowhere that's safe. While this did create an entirely different game for me, it also gave me the same feeling of suspense and fear that was so resonant in the past Resident Evils. It just had a lot more action in it, and in there lies the problem. This game was so successful that Capcom thought that the action part of it was the only reason why it was successful. So then they created more games with more and more action, and the fear and the suspense just melted away. Now they're completely rebooting the whole franchise with Resident Evil 7, but that's for another video. So there you have it, my top 5 Resident Evil games. Let me know in the comments below if there's a title that you felt should have made it onto the top 5. Give me a nice thumbs up if you liked the video, and don't forget to subscribe.